Have the Panthers finally found Greg Olsen's replacement? We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday as we're still in off-season mode. But starting on July 15th, we'll be back to your team every day, which is our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at Julian Council, where the weekly Friday mailbag will continue on July 26th as the Panthers will be in training camp then. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. We continue our annual positional breakdowns here in Carolina. Last week started off with the quarterbacks, then talked about the running backs, and on Friday broke down the wide receiver position in Carolina. And on today's show, let's take a look at the tight end group, which Dave Canales said 2 weeks ago they believe is a very versatile group, which is interesting considering the Panthers have had the worst tight end group since Greg Olsen left Carolina in 2019, then retired following the 2020 season, which he spent in Seattle. And quite honestly, the Panthers have not been able to replace Greg Olsen, which leads me to the biggest story about the biggest name in the tight end room. And in my opinion, the biggest story and the biggest name is Ja'Tavion Sanders, Carolina Panthers 4th-round pick out of Texas, pick 101, someone who probably should have gone day 2, but didn't, which is the benefit of the Carolina Panthers. Talking about it during the draft, I was hopeful the Panthers could land a tight end of the caliber of Ja'Tavion Sanders. I never necessarily believed that he would be available for the Panthers, considering the other needs that they had, and that was not necessarily the approach the Panthers took, as they took a running back in the 2nd round, took a linebacker in the 3rd round, 2 positions that you wouldn't have looked at heading to the draft thinking that the Panthers needed to address. You felt like tight end was a position that they absolutely needed to address, and they didn't address it during free agency, where Noah Fant, Will Dissly, and Kobe Parkinson, all 3 of the Seattle tight ends, were all available as free agents. Fant stayed in Seattle. The other 2 headed to LA playing for the Rams and Chargers respectively, and the Panthers kind of struck out there with one of those Seahawks tight ends. So the Panthers were not able to bring anyone in during free agency. They needed to do it during the draft, and they did it by getting JT Sanders. And I said it then, I'll still say it now, favorite pick of the draft. And I really think that the Panthers have finally found Greg Olsen's replacement. They have not been able to do that. Greg Olsen's last fully healthy season before all the foot issues was in 2016, which is also the last year of his back-to-back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons, when he was their best receiving option. Ted Ginn Jr. had one of those years that was big. There were times where Devin Funchess and Philly Brown and hell, even Brenton Burson showed up. But really, there were times where guys like Kalen Clay just couldn't catch the football when you needed him to in a vital wild card round game on the road in Seattle. Cam Newton never really had the greatest of receivers, but he had Greg Olsen, and Greg Olsen has an opportunity to have a bust in Canton, which just shows the value that he has in Carolina and just how good of a player he was in the NFL overall. The Carolina, since losing Greg Olsen in 2019, his last year where he played 14 games, had 52 receptions, 597 yards, 2 touchdowns, they have not even come close to replacing him as a unit, let alone finding a singular replacement as that pass-catching tight end in that big part of the offense. We have become accustomed here since the iteration of the Panthers, them coming to Carolina, since the inception, rather, of the team, of having that high-level pass-catching tight end. We had Greg, had Wesley Walls, hell, even Dante Rosario had his moments in time. We have not been used to what's been going on here over the last 5 seasons, where the Panthers have had the worst, or last 4 seasons, rather, the Panthers have had the worst tight end production in the NFL. And going through it, 2020, pandemic season, first year without Greg Olsen, the Panthers tight end group collectively, y'all, 27 receptions, 204 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's terrible. 2021, 38 receptions, 368 yards, single touchdown. Again, brutal. It got better the last 2 seasons. Back in 2022, combined 50 receptions, 517 yards, 3 touchdowns, which is still collectively worse than what Greg Olsen did individually in his final season in Carolina with the 52 receptions, 597 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So one more touchdown, but less receptions, less yardage. Last year, the Panthers finally had more receptions together as a tight end room than Greg Olsen did in 2019 with 59 compared to 52, but still less yardage, 561 yards compared to 597. But they did double his touchdown total with 4 touchdowns last year compared to the 2 that he had in his final season. Either way, the numbers that we've seen this group put together, if that was one player, you wouldn't be happy about 2020 or really 2021. You'd be pretty content with it in 22 and 23. The problem is it's been 3, it's been 4, it's been 5 players combining for those numbers. And we felt like this time last year, the Panthers had finally found Greg Olsen's replacement. They signed Hayden Hurst to a 3-year, $21.75 million deal with $13 million guaranteed. And what did he do? Had a great opening game against Atlanta where he was the Panthers' leading receiver, had a touchdown. But in totality, it was 18 receptions for 184 yards. And of course, that lone touchdown coming week 1 against the Falcons. That was his season. He missed the final 8 games due to complications, suffered from a concussion, and I was concerned about his overall health and wondered whether he should still play football. And I understand I'm not a neurologist, I'm not a doctor, but still, we understand now as a general public that concussions aren't something to mess with. That's your brain. Now he's a Charger. Best of luck with him in LA, but the Panthers made the right decision health-wise, but really production-wise to not keep Hayden Hurst around. So that now brings me to JT Sanders, who the Panthers used that first pick in the 4th round to select out of Texas. Daniel Jeremiah on the NFL Network right as the selection was made. You're drafting him for what he's going to give you in the passing game, not so much in the run game. And here's the thing. I'm not concerned about what the tight end group here in Carolina could do in the run game. I am concerned what they can do in the passing game and what they have done in the passing game over the last 4 years since Greg Olsen left. That is my concern. So when Daniel Jeremiah said that, fine, sign me up. We have run blockers here. What you need are pass catchers and really playmakers, which none of the tight ends returning, in my opinion, are. Now, there's one of them, Tommy Tremble, we'll get to him momentarily, who I think can take that next step. But is he going to put up the numbers that Greg put up his last season or what I think JT Sanders can do? No. And here's the thing about the tight end position. Typically, if he did not produce in the passing game, in the collegiate level, you're unlikely to put up numbers once you get to the NFL. Looking at what JT Sanders did his last 2 seasons at Texas, 99 receptions, 1,295 yards, 7 touchdowns. Now, quick Google search of Tommy Tremble's college stats, and you'll just see the difference between what Sanders did and what Tremble did when he was at Notre Dame. When he was at Notre Dame for 2 seasons, Tommy Tremble had 35 receptions, 396 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So again, compare that to what JT Sanders did at Texas for 2 seasons. 99 receptions, 61 more, 64 more. Let me do math. 64 more than what Tommy Tremble had in his 2 seasons at Notre Dame, and in 1,295 yards compared to 396, 4 touchdowns compared to 7. So the touchdown totals kind of close, but the production overall not anywhere close, which is what brings the expectation that JT Sanders can finally be that Greg Olsen replacement. He was tied 18th in college football last season for yards at the catch at 7.7, which is pretty doggone good for a tight end. And he was second among FBS tight ends with 12 catches of 20 plus yards in 2023, only behind, of course, Brack Bowers, the first round pick. So I think this is the replacement of Greg Olsen. I think the Panthers have finally done it, and we've waited 4 long years. There have been false prophets like Ian Thomas and even Tommy Tremble to a lesser extent who have not lived up to those expectations. The expectations should truly be on Ja'Tavion Sanders to be the replacement of Greg Olsen, something the Panthers have not been able to do over the last 4 years and really Even those 2 years when Greg went down, last kind of 6.5 years here in Carolina. Sanders is the answer, and I'm excited to watch him play. So we know JT Sanders is coming in here when he potentially can provide. What about the rest of the tight end room? Can Tommy Tremble take that next step? What exactly is Ian Thomas's role going to be? And are any other guys going to make the team? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. Summertime means baseball, and you can bet it all on FanDuel right now. New customers get $200 in bonus bets of any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on who's going to hit one out of the park, whether it's Major League Baseball, as we're getting close to the Midsummer Classic. Cannot wait to see the Home Run Derby and all the things that happen with the All-Star Game. Or you can bet on who's going to win the AL MVP or NL MVP, Cy Young, all that. And, of course, going on in Omaha, go to FanDuel. They have the odds. Tennessee, Texas A&M Championship Series starting on Saturday, potentially ending on Sunday, depending on how things play out. Go over to FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I think the Panthers have found Greg Olsen's replacement. Finally, at long last, they have that man in Ja'Tavion Sanders. So what does that mean for the rest of the tight end room here in Carolina? Taking a quick look at the depth chart, the guy who still, even with the addition of Sanders, is at the top of the depth chart is Tommy Tremble. And I thought Tommy Tremble played really well last season. Now, the numbers as far as receiving-wise aren't going to be overwhelming, and that's going to play a big role in how some of the advanced analytics like Pro Football Focus look at him. But overall, I thought like he had a good season, a solid season, especially considering like he's been a solid player, but really felt like he took that next step forward last year. Now heading into this season, can he take an even bigger step forward? He did say that last offseason, that was the first time in his career as a Panther heading into year 3 where he had actually been taught how to run routes as a tight end and was really thinking about being a receiver at that position, where prior, when Joe Brady was here, that wasn't really the expectation for him and really for the tight end room. That changed last season. And I think even without having the whole pedigree of Frank Reich liking tight ends, even though they didn't really use them all that much, now Dave Canales, we saw last year with Cade Otton in Tampa that they will utilize a tight end like they did with Otton in the past game. So I'm expecting that to be the case. And Canales said a lot of positive things about the versatility of this group and how he thinks that they can be that check down, that safety valve for Bryce Young and be a part of the pass game. Just how big of a part of the pass game will guys not named Ja'Tavion Sanders be? That is the question. But really, I'm wondering again, can Tommy Tremble take the next step? Last year, look at his stats in the receiving game: 32 targets, 23 receptions, 194 yards, 3 touchdowns. Nothing to really write home about, but a 50% receiving success rate, had a 71.9% catch percentage, which is pretty doggone good when you look at what the receivers' catch percentage were. Now, they did get more targets than Tremble did, but a lot of those guys, not named Adam Thielen, had a tough time bringing those targets in and getting open. Tremble was pretty solid too. Once Hayden Hurst went down, that's when the bulk of those numbers came out. 20 targets, 12 receptions, 121 yards, and a touchdown in the 8 games that Hayden Hurst missed last season. And just looking at his career, and it's just kind of the thing when Tremble Hive tries to talk about, their guy is going to be a breakout candidate, he's going to really be that answer at the tight end position. His career numbers to date, y'all: 62 receptions, 548 yards, 7 touchdowns. And just compare that to the last year of Greg Olsen in Carolina. Greg had 52 receptions, 597 yards, 2 touchdowns. So less yardage in his career than what Greg Olsen had his final season as a Carolina Panther in 2019. And I understand you're probably saying right now, we're not saying he's going to be Greg Olsen. Totally get it. But remember, Greg Olsen, damn good player. Wesley Wallace, damn good player. Both are going to be. Wesley's already up there. Greg will be up there in the Ring of Honor one day. I don't know if Tommy Tremble is going to make it up into the Ring of Honor, especially with those career stats. Now, he has a chance to be better. Looking at Pro Football Focus last year, his overall grade was 55.6, 52nd out of 72 tight ends. His receiving grade was 62.0, 32nd out of 49 qualifying tight ends. And his run block grade, which this is where he's really been considered a plus player for the Panthers, it was a 44.5, lowest of his career, and that has declined since his rookie year. I don't know if the eyes match the numbers, and a lot of times with PFF, the eyes don't always match the numbers. And when they do, that player's an elite player. So I think he was probably more of a middle of the road tight end than kind of one of the back end tight ends in the NFL last year. But if you're going to factor in a lot of things like receiving, that's just not really what it's going to be. But his receiving grade is better than his blocking grade. So that is very interesting to me as far as Tommy Tremble. I expect Tommy to be kind of that first string guy. He's going to be the 1A to Ja'Tavion Sanders 1B. They're going to want to throw him the ball a little bit. They're going to also want to have him as a run blocker primarily, and he'll be a good complement to Ja'Tavion Sanders, who's coming in as a rookie here in Carolina. Ian Thomas. I call him the survivor because I have no idea how the hell he's still on this roster. And I know a lot of y'all are sick of him being in Carolina, are also wondering how of all the guys like Brian Burns, he's gone. Dante Jackson, he's gone. DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey. How is it that those players aren't in Carolina and Ian Thomas is in Carolina? Well, one, because those players are actually valued and coveted outside of Charlotte, whereas Ian Thomas has no value. But he has a value in a way here in Carolina as the tight end 3, I think, heading into the season as a run blocker. We thought for a period of time that he could be Greg Olsen's replacement. And after 6 seasons, we now firmly know that is not going to be the case. 5 receptions last year on a career low, 9 targets. I mean, both of those are career lows, 56 yards. That's what you put up in a single game. I'm pretty sure that's what Hayden Hurst put up in his first game against Atlanta before he decided not to do anything the rest of the year. Really wasn't even targeted. 27% of the offensive snaps is what Thomas played last year, which matches 2019. So that was the last year, Greg Olsen, and that was his 3rd year in the league. Not ideal. Look at his numbers. First 2 seasons in Carolina, when there was some hope that he could be a solid pass catcher at the tight end spot. 52 receptions, 79 targets, 469 yards, 3 touchdowns. Pretty solid, especially for a guy who had to fill in for Greg Olsen at times. Past 4 seasons, 64 receptions on 100 targets, 586 yards, and a touchdown. Again, if someone can do that in one single season, that's good. If it's across 4 seasons, especially when they put up similar numbers across their first 2, that ain't it. And Ian Thomas, I don't expect him to be a part of the pass game. And when you think about this year, even with like Tremble and Sanders, I mean, Sanders, a little bit different. Deontay Johnson, going to be the top target there at wide receiver. You're going to want to get the ball to Adam Thielen. You're going to want to get the ball to Xavier Legette. You're going to want to get the ball to Jonathan Brooks whenever he's healthy out of the backfield. You're not trying to get the ball to Ian Thomas. You're not trying to get the ball to Tommy Tremble. You want to get the ball to Ja'Tavion Sanders at the tight end spot. So the tight end option is going to be the 4th or 5th option, 3rd at best anyways in this offense. So with that in mind, Ian Thomas, you've already learned how to block, buddy, but continue to learn how to block. That's what your role is going to be this season. Stephon Sullivan, former wide receiver at LSU, who's transitioned into a tight end in the NFL, and it's a tough transition, as I've brought up before. If you weren't much of a receiver in college, likely not going to be that in the NFL, and it's a position that takes some time. We're seeing Tommy Tremble continue to progress throughout his career here, entering year 4, contract year, last year's rookie deal. Those are always undefeated. Well, not always, but most times are undefeated, and Ja'Tavion Sanders is going to take him some time. I do think he's Greg's replacement, just going to kind of try and manage expectations early on, but he'll get there. I have no doubt about that. Stephon Sullivan had 12 receptions last year on 24 targets. That's a 50% catch percentage, which is pretty good. 125 yards, and 5 of those 12 receptions went for a first down. So at the very least, if it can be somebody who can help you pick up first downs on 3rd down or even early on 1st, 2nd down, I like that. I don't know how much the staff's going to value him. Now, here's the thing. I believe, and let me do another quick Google search here while I'm recording with y'all now. I believe he began his career in Seattle, which I'm still on the college stats. Let's see. I'm pretty sure that Stephon Sullivan began his career in Seattle, which if that's the case, that absolutely will help him in his pursuit to make this team. And he spent 2020 in Seattle. So Dave Canales are aware of who he is and what he can provide potentially. So that will give him an opportunity to make the roster in Carolina. The final tight end is Jordan Matthews, who once upon a time was a promising wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles out of Vandy. Now a converted tight end over the hill past the age of 30, Frank Reich guy. So don't really think he's going to get an opportunity to be one of the guys who stays on the roster in Carolina. So how many tight ends will the Panthers keep? this upcoming season. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. How many tight ends will Dave Canales and the Panthers want to keep on this offense? Canales says that he has a versatile tight end room. I wonder just how versatile those guys are outside of, well, here, that's interesting too, because if we talk about versatility, quick aside, Sanders is considered more a pass catcher than a blocker. It's not that versatile. Tremble can do a little bit of both, but more of a run blocker. Ian Thomas, run blocker. Stephon Sullivan, just a pass catcher. Now there's versatility in the room. There's guys who can block. There's guys who can catch. Are there guys who can block and catch? That is kind of the key question in a way heading into this season, but not all that important as we're trying to figure out who are the four. I guess it is a little important. We're going to figure out who the guys the Panthers will end up keeping here as I try to project a 53-man roster. And I'm doing this, and I'm not even really considering all the numbers of the guys who are going to be kept at the other position groups, but just a guess of guys who will make it. Guaranteed roster spot. Now, actually, let me bring this up. The Bucks last year with Canales as their OC kept 4. The Seahawks kept 3. And, of course, a large part of this coaching staff, including Pat McPherson, come from Seattle. And McPherson was his tight end coach last year in Seattle, been the tight end coach there under Pete Carroll for the last 13 seasons. The guys I think who are guaranteed to be on the roster, Tommy Tremble, Ja'Tavion Sanders. Roster bubble, Ian Thomas, but I don't really feel that strongly that he won't make the roster. And then Stephon Sullivan. If they're keeping, I think they're probably going to keep 4, quite honestly. Like Jordan Matthews, I don't even think he's a practice squad guy. I have him listed in the practice squad or just ain't going to be here category. And I think he's just ain't going to be here. So I wouldn't even really think about him. Of the 5 here, I do think Tremble, Sanders, they're good. Thomas is probably good. And then Sullivan, I think he'll make it. I think because of the past relationship he's had in Seattle. And if he doesn't, he'll be a practice squad player. So if they're keeping 3, it's Tremble, it's Sanders, it's Thomas. If they're keeping 4, it's Tremble, it's Sanders, it's Thomas, and then it's Sullivan. I don't see Jordan Matthews getting that opportunity. This is another position group, though, where there's 2 guys who you feel pretty good about being on the roster. The other, and maybe you feel good about Ian or Stephon. But this is a position group where I'm wondering, come roster cut down, they're going to look across the league, see who's available on that waiver wire. Do you add another tight end to this room? Talk is cheap. Canales is saying that he likes the room, thinks it's versatile, and yada, yada, yada. We all look at it. We've all seen. He hasn't been here. He watched the tape last season. I'm sure he's I don't know how far back he's watched tape. But we've been here. We can watch it. You're not dumb. Football's not that complicated. If it was, it wouldn't be the most popular sport in America. We can see that this tight end room has been cheeks. So adding one player who's a rookie, who's not much of a blocker, I don't think it just overnight is going to completely change the tight end group. Yeah, Tommy Tremble can get better. Ian Thomas is who he is. Stephon Sullivan, I don't know how much or how high his ceiling is. And Jordan Matthews, he's kind of hanging on to a dream, which he's already fulfilled the dream, which I'm just kind of like, go hang out, go chill. We'll see. I think that 3 probably makes the most sense, and then go get somebody. But all depends on who's available. So we'll see how that works out. All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And follow me on Twitter at Julian Council, where I'll be back for the weekly Friday mailbag starting on July 26th once training camp has begun here in Carolina. On Wednesday, I am back with y'all, and we are going to be talking about the Carolina Panthers offensive line. And we're going to split up the offensive line this year. Going to do offensive tackles on Wednesday. Then on Friday, going to talk about the guard spots as the Panthers made some 2 big key additions there. They've made a key addition at swing tackle this offseason as well. So talking offensive tackles on Wednesday, talking offensive guards on Friday. Then next Monday, the state of the Carolina Panthers offense will be doing that pod. So in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, and forever keep pounding. And I'll talk to y'all on Wednesday.